Tonight, we drift into a quieter world, a world where ancient forests whisper secrets, and every word is a gentle bridge to peace. Whether it is a lesson of the heart, a hero's journey, or a dream from long ago, you don't need to follow every detail. You don't need to hold on to any thought. Just listen. Let the rhythm of the tale wash over you. And as your body grows heavy, let the magic of these stories carry you away into a deep and effortless sleep. The fir tree, far down in the forest, where the warm sun and the fresh air made a sweet resting place, grew a pretty little fir tree. And yet, it was not happy. It wished so much to be tall like its companions, the pines and firs which grew around it. The sun shone, and the soft air fluttered its leaves, and the little peasant children passed by, prattling merrily, but the fir tree heeded them not. Sometimes the children would bring a large basket of raspberries or strawberries wreathed on a straw and seat themselves near the fir tree and say, "Is it not a pretty little tree?" which made it feel more unhappy than before. And yet, all this while the tree grew a notch or joint taller every year. For by the number of joints in the stem of a fir tree, we can discover its age. Still as it grew, it complained, "Oh, how I wish I were as tall as the other trees. Then I would spread out my branches on every side, and my top would overlook the wide world. I should have the birds building their nests on my boughs, and when the wind blew, I should bow with stately dignity, like my tall companions." The tree was so discontented that it took no pleasure in the warm sunshine, the birds, or the rosy clouds that floated over it morning and evening. Sometimes in winter, when the snow lay white and glittering on the ground, a hare would come springing along and jump right over the little tree. And then, how mortified it would feel. 2 winters passed, and when the third arrived, the tree had grown so tall that the hare was obliged to run round it. Yet it remained unsatisfied, and would exclaim, "Oh, if I could but keep on growing tall and old, there is nothing else worth caring for in the world." In the autumn, as usual, the woodcutters came and cut down several of the tallest trees, and the young fir tree, which was now grown to its full height, shuddered as the noble trees fell to the earth with a crash. After the branches were lopped off, the trunks looked so slender and bare that they could scarcely be recognized. Then they were placed upon wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. Where were they going? What would become of them? The young fir tree wished very much to know. So in the spring, when the swallows and the storks came, it asked, "Do you know where those trees were taken? Did you meet them?" The swallows knew nothing but the stork. After a little reflection, nodded his head and said, "Yes, I think I do. I met several new ships when I flew from Egypt, and they had fine masts that smelt like fur. I think these must have been the trees. I assure you, they were stately, very stately. Oh, how I wish I were tall enough to go on the sea," said the fir tree. "What is the sea, and what does it look like?" "It would take too much time to explain," said the stork, flying quickly away. "Rejoice in thy youth," said the sunbeam. "Rejoice in thy fresh growth, and the young life that is in thee." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew watered it with tears. But the fir tree regarded them not. Christmas time drew near, and many young trees were cut down, some even smaller and younger than the fir tree, who enjoyed neither rest nor peace with longing to leave its forest home. These young trees, which were chosen for their beauty, kept their branches, and were also laid on wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. "Where are they going?" asked the fir tree. "They are not taller than I am. Indeed, one is much less. And why are the branches not cut off?" "Where are they going?" We know, sang the sparrows. "We have looked in at the windows of the houses in the town, and we know what is done with them. They are dressed up in the most splendid manner. We have seen them standing in the middle of a warm room and adorned with all sorts of beautiful things: honey cakes, gilded apples, playthings, and many hundreds of wax tapers." "And then," asked the fir tree, trembling through all its branches, "and then what happens?" "We did not see any more," said the sparrows. "But this was enough for us." "I wonder whether anything so brilliant will ever happen to me," thought the fir tree. "It would be much better than crossing the sea. I long for it, almost with pain. Oh, when will Christmas be here? I am now as tall and well grown as those which were taken away last year. Oh, that I were now laid on the wagon, or standing in the warm room with all that brightness and splendor around me. Something better and more beautiful is to come after, or the trees would not be so decked out. Yes, what follows will be grander and more splendid. What can it be? I am weary with longing. I scarcely know how I feel." "Rejoice with us," said the air and the sunlight. "Enjoy thine own bright life in the fresh air." But the tree would not rejoice, though it grew taller every day. And winter and summer, its dark green foliage might be seen in the forest, while passers-by would say, "What a beautiful tree." A short time before Christmas, the discontented fir tree was the first to fall. As the axe cut through the stem and divided the pith, the tree fell with a groan to to the earth, conscious of pain and faintness, and forgetting all its anticipations of happiness in sorrow. At leaving its home in the forest, it knew that it should never again see its dear old companions, the trees, nor the little bushes and many-colored flowers that had grown by its side. Perhaps not even the birds. Neither was the journey at all pleasant. The tree first recovered itself while being unpacked in the courtyard of a house with several other trees. And it heard a man say, "We only want one, and this is the prettiest." Then came 2 servants in grand livery and carried the fir tree into a large and beautiful apartment. On the walls hung pictures, and near the great stove stood great china vases with lions on the lids. There were rocking chairs, silken, sofas, large tables covered with pictures, books, and playthings worth a great deal of money. At least the children said so. Then the fir tree was placed in a large tub full of sand, but green baize hung all around it, so that no one could see. It was a tub, and it stood on a very handsome carpet. How the fir tree trembled. What was going to happen to him now? Some young ladies came, and the servants helped them to adorn the tree. On one branch, they hung little bags cut out of colored paper, and each bag was filled with sweetmeats. From other branches hung gilded apples and walnuts, as if they had grown there. And above and all round were hundreds of red, blue, and white tapers, which were fastened on the branches. Dolls, exactly like real babies, were placed under the green leaves. The tree had never seen such things before, and at the very top was fastened a glittering star made of tinsel. Oh, it was very beautiful. This evening, they all exclaimed, "How bright it will be." Oh, that the evening were come, thought the tree, and the tapers lighted. Then I shall know what else is going to happen. Will the trees of the forest come to see me? I wonder if the sparrows will peep in at the windows as they fly. Shall I grow faster here and keep on all these ornaments, summer and winter? But guessing was of very little use. It made his bark ache, and this pain is as bad for a slender fir tree as headache is for us. At last the tapers were lighted, and then what a glistening blaze of light the tree presented. It trembled so with joy in all its branches that one of the candles fell among the green leaves and burnt some of them. "Help! Help!" exclaimed the young ladies. But there was no danger, for they quickly extinguished the fire. After this, the tree tried not to tremble at all, though the fire frightened him. He was so anxious not to hurt any of the beautiful ornaments, even while their brilliancy dazzled him. And now the folding doors were thrown open, and a troop of children rushed in as if they intended to upset the tree. They were followed more silently by their elders. For a moment, The little ones stood silent with astonishment, and then they shouted for joy till the room rang, and they danced merrily round the tree, while one present after another was taken from it. What are they doing? What will happen next? Thought the fir. At last the candles burnt down to the branches and were put out. Then the children received permission to plunder the tree. Oh, how they rushed upon it till the branches cracked, and had it not been fastened with the glistening star to the ceiling, it must have been thrown down. The children then danced about with their pretty toys, and no one noticed the tree except the children's maid, who came and peeped among the branches to see if an apple or a fig had been forgotten. A story, cried the children, pulling a little fat man towards the tree. Now we shall be in the green shade, said the man, as he seated himself under it. And the tree will have the pleasure of hearing also. But I shall only relate one story. What shall it be? Ivede Avede, or Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs, but soon got up again, and at last married a princess. Ivede Avede, cried some. Humpty Dumpty, cried others, and there was a fine shouting and crying out. But the fir tree remained quite still, and thought to himself, shall I have anything to do with all this? But he had already amused them as much as they wished. Then the old man told them the story of Humpty Dumpty, how he fell downstairs and was raised up again and married a princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried, tell another, for they wanted to hear the story of Ivede Avede. But they only had Humpty Dumpty. After this, the fir tree became quite silent and thoughtful. Never had the birds in the forest told such tales as Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs and yet married a princess. Ah yes, so it happens in the world, thought the fir tree. He believed it all because it was related by such a nice man. Ah, well, he thought, who knows, perhaps I may fall down too and marry a princess. And he looked forward joyfully to the next evening, expecting to be again decked out with lights and playthings, gold and fruit. Tomorrow I will not tremble, thought he. I will enjoy all my splendor, and I shall hear the story of Humpty Dumpty again, and perhaps Ivede Avede. And the tree remained quiet and thoughtful all night. In the morning, the servants and the housemaid came in. Now, thought the fir, all my splendor is going to begin again. But they dragged him out of the room and upstairs to the garret, and threw him on the floor in a dark corner where no daylight shone. And there they left him. What does this mean? Thought the tree. What am I to do here? I can hear nothing in a place like this. and he had time enough to think for days and nights passed, and no one came near him. And when at last somebody did come, it was only to put away large boxes in a corner. So the tree was completely hidden from sight, as if it had never existed. It is winter now, thought the tree. The ground is hard and covered with snow, so that people cannot plant me. I shall be sheltered here, I dare say, until spring comes. How thoughtful and kind everybody is to me. Still, I wish this place were not so dark, as well as lonely, with not even a little hair to look at. How pleasant it was out in the forest, while the snow lay on the ground, when the hare would run by, yes, and jump over me too, although I did not like it then. Oh, it is terrible lonely here. Squeak, squeak, said a little mouse, creeping cautiously towards the tree. Then came another, and they both sniffed at the fir tree and crept between the branches. Oh, it is very cold, said the little mouse, or else we should be so comfortable here, shouldn't we, you old fir tree? I am not old, said the fir tree. There are many who are older than I am. Where do you come from, and what do you know? Asked the mice, who were full of curiosity. Have you seen the most beautiful places in the world? And can you tell us all about them? And have you been in the storeroom, where cheeses lie on the shelf and hams hang from the ceiling? One can run about on tallow candles there and go in thin and come out fat. I know nothing of that place, said the fir tree, but I know the wood where the sun shines and the birds sing. And then the tree told the little mice all about its youth. They had never heard such an account in their lives. And after they had listened to it attentively, they said, "What a number of things you have seen. You must have been very happy." "Happy!" exclaimed the fir tree. And then, as he reflected upon what he had been telling them, he said, "Ah, yes, after all, those were happy days. Cool." But when he went on and related all about Christmas Eve and how he had been dressed up with cakes and lights, the mice said, "How happy you must have been, you old fir tree." "I am not old at all," replied the tree. "I only am from the forest this winter. I am now checked in my growth." "What splendid stories you can relate," said the little mice. And the next night, 4 other mice came with them to hear what the tree had to tell. The more he talked, the more he remembered. And then he thought to himself, "Those were happy days, but they may come again." Humpty Dumpty fell downstairs, and yet he married the princess. Perhaps I may marry a princess too. And the fir tree thought of the pretty little birch tree that grew in the forest, which was to him a real beautiful princess. "Who is Humpty Dumpty?" asked the little mice. And then the tree related the whole story. He could remember every single word, and the little mice was so delighted with it that they were ready to jump to the top of the tree. The next night, a great many more mice made their appearance, and on Sunday, 2 rats came with them. But they said it was not a pretty story at all, and the little mice were very sorry for it, made them also think less of it. "Do you know only one story?" asked the rats. "Only one," replied the fir tree. "I heard it on the happiest evening of my life, but I did not know I was so happy at the time." "We think it is a very miserable story," said the rats. "Don't you know any story about bacon or tallow in the storeroom?" "No," replied the tree. "Many thanks to you then," replied the rats, and they marched off. The little mice also kept away after this, and the tree sighed and said, "It was very pleasant when the merry little mice sat round me and listened while I talked. Now that is all past too. However, I shall consider myself happy when someone comes to take me out of this place. But would this ever happen? Yes. One morning, people came to clear out the garret. The boxes were packed away, and the tree was pulled out of the corner and thrown roughly on the garret floor. Then the servant dragged it out upon the staircase where the daylight shone. "Now, life is beginning again," said the tree, rejoicing in the sunshine and fresh air. Then it was carried downstairs and taken into the courtyard so quickly that it forgot to think of itself and could only look about. There was so much to be seen. The court was close to a garden where everything looked blooming. Fresh and fragrant roses hung over the little palings. The linden trees were in blossom, while the swallows flew here and there, crying, "Twit, twit, twit, my mate is coming." But it was not the fir tree they meant. "Now I shall live," cried the tree joyfully, spreading out its branches. But alas, they were all withered and yellow, and it lay in a corner amongst weeds and nettles. The star of gold paper still stuck in the top of the tree and glittered in the sunshine. In the same courtyard, 2 of the merry children were playing who had danced round the tree at Christmas and had been so happy. The youngest saw the gilded star and ran and pulled it off the tree. "Look what is sticking to the ugly old fir tree," said the child, treading on the branches till they crackled under his boots. And the tree saw all the fresh, bright flowers in the garden, and then looked at itself and wished it had remained in the dark corner of the garret. It thought of its fresh youth in the forest of the merry Christmas evening, and of the little mice who had listened to the story of Humpty Dumpty. "Past, past," said the old tree. "Oh, had I but enjoyed myself while I could have done so, but now it is too late." Then a lad came and chopped the tree into small pieces till a large bundle lay in a heap on the ground. The pieces were placed in a fire under the copper, and they quickly blazed up brightly, while the tree sighed so deeply that each sigh was like a pistol shot. Then the children who were at play came and seated themselves in front of the fire and looked at it and cried, "Pop, pop." But at each pop, which was a deep sigh, the tree was thinking of a summer day in the forest, and of Christmas evening, and of Humpty Dumpty, the only story it had ever heard or knew how to relate, till at last it was consumed. The boys still played in the garden, and the youngest wore the golden star on his breast, with which the tree had been adorned during the happiest evening of its existence. Now all was past. The tree's life was past, and the story also. For all stories must come to an end at last. The Nightingale in China. You know the emperor is a Chinese, and all those about him are Chinamen also. The story I am going to tell you happened a great many years ago, so it is well to hear it now before it is forgotten. The emperor's palace was the most beautiful in the world. It was built entirely of porcelain and very costly, but so delicate and brittle that whoever touched it was obliged to be careful. In the garden could be seen the most singular flowers with pretty silver bells tied to them, which tinkled so that everyone who passed could not help noticing the flowers. Indeed, everything in the emperor's garden was remarkable, and it extended so far that the gardener himself did not know where it ended. Those who traveled beyond its limits knew that there was a noble forest with lofty trees sloping down to the deep blue sea, and the great ships sailed under the shadow of its branches. In one of these trees lived a nightingale who sang so beautifully that even the poor fisherman, who had so many other things to do, would stop and listen. Sometimes, when they went at night to spread their nets, they would hear her sing and say, "Oh, I not that beautiful." But when they returned to their fishing, they forgot the bird until the next night. Then they would hear it again and exclaim, "Oh, how beautiful is the nightingale's song." Travelers from every country in the world came to the city of the emperor, which they admired very much, as well as the palace and gardens. But when they heard the nightingale, they all declared it to be the best of all. And the travelers, on their return home, related what they had seen. And learned men wrote books containing descriptions of the town, the palace, and the gardens. But they did not forget the nightingale, which was really the greatest wonder. And those who could write poetry composed beautiful verses about the nightingale, who lived in a forest near the deep sea. The books traveled all over the world, and some of them came into the hands of the emperor. And he sat in his golden chair, and as he read, he nodded his approval. every moment, for it pleased him to find such a beautiful description of his city, his palace, and his gardens. But when he came to the words, "The nightingale is the most beautiful of all," he exclaimed, "What is this? I know nothing of any nightingale. Is there such a bird in my empire, and even in my garden? I have never heard of it. Something, it appears, may be learnt from books." Then he called one of his lords in waiting, who was so high-bred that when any in an inferior rank to himself spoke to him or asked him a question, he would answer, "Pooh," which means nothing. "There is a very wonderful bird mentioned here called a nightingale," said the emperor. "They say it is the best thing in my large kingdom. Why have I not been told of it?" "I have never heard the name," replied the cavalier. "She has not been presented at court. It is my pleasure that she shall appear this evening," said the emperor. "The whole world knows what I possess better than I do myself." "I have never heard of her," said the cavalier. "Yet I will endeavor to find her." But where was the nightingale to be found? The nobleman went upstairs and down through halls and passages. Yet none of those whom he met had heard of the bird. So he returned to the emperor and said that it must be a fable invented by those who had written the book. "Your Imperial Majesty," said he, "cannot believe everything contained in books. Sometimes they are only fiction, or what is called the black art. But the book in which I have read this account," said the emperor, "was sent to me by the great and mighty Emperor of Japan, and therefore it cannot contain a falsehood. I will hear the nightingale. She must be here this evening. She has my highest favor, and if she does not come, the whole court shall be trampled upon after supper is ended." "Tsing-peng!" cried the lord in waiting, and again he ran up and down stairs through all the halls and corridors, and half the court ran with him, for they did not like the idea of being trampled upon. There was a great inquiry about this wonderful nightingale, whom all the world knew, but who was unknown to the court. At last they met with a poor little girl in the kitchen, who said, "Oh, yes, I know the nightingale quite well. Indeed, she can sing. Every evening I have permission to take home to my poor sick mother the scraps from the table. She lives down by the seashore, and as I come back, I feel tired, and I sit down in the wood to rest and listen to the nightingale's song. Then the tears come into my eyes, and it is just as if my mother kissed me." "Little maiden," said the lord in waiting, "I will obtain for you constant employment in the kitchen, and you shall have permission to see the emperor dine if you will lead us to the nightingale, for she is invited for this evening to the palace." So she went into the wood where the nightingale sang, and half the court followed her. As they went along, a cow began lowing. "Oh," said a young courtier. "Now we have found her. What wonderful power for such a small creature. I have certainly heard it before." "No, that is only a cow lowing," said the little girl. "We are a long way from the place yet." Then some frogs began to croak in the marsh. "Beautiful," said the young courtier again. "Now I hear it tinkling like little church bells." "No, those are frogs," said the little maiden. "But I think we shall soon hear her now." And presently the nightingale began to sing. "Hark, hark, there she is," said the girl. "And there she sits," she added, pointing to a little gray bird who was perched on a bough. "Is it possible?" said the lord in waiting. "I never imagined it would be a little, plain, simple thing like that. She has certainly changed color at seeing so many grand people around her." "Little Nightingale," cried the girl, raising her voice, "our most gracious emperor wishes you to sing before him." "With the greatest pleasure," said the nightingale, and began to sing most delightfully. "It sounds like tiny glass bells," said the lord in waiting, "and see how her little throat works. It is surprising that we have never heard this before. She will be a great success at court." "Shall I sing once more before the emperor?" asked the nightingale, who thought he was present. "My excellent little nightingale," said the courtier, "I have the great pleasure of inviting you to a court festival this evening, where you will gain imperial favor by your charming song." "My song sounds best in the green wood," said the bird. But still she came willingly when she heard the emperor's wish. The palace was elegantly decorated for the occasion. The walls and floors of porcelain glittered in the light of 1,000 lamps. Beautiful flowers, which little bells were tied, stood in the corridors. What with the running to and fro and the draught, these bells tinkled so loudly that no one could speak to be heard. In the center of the great hall, a golden perch had been fixed for the nightingale to sit on. The whole court was present, and the little kitchen maid had received permission to stand by the door. She was not installed as a real court cook. All were in full dress, and every eye was turned to the little gray bird when the emperor nodded to her to begin. The nightingale sang so sweetly that the tears came into the emperor's eyes and then rolled down his cheeks as her song became still more touching and went to everyone's heart. The emperor was so delighted that he declared the nightingale should have his gold slipper to wear round her neck. But she declined the honor, with thanks. She had been sufficiently rewarded already. "I have seen tears in an emperor's eyes," she said. "That is my richest reward. An emperor's tears have wonderful power and are quite sufficient honor for me." And then she sang again, more enchantingly than ever. "That singing is a lovely gift," said the ladies of the court to each other. And then they took water in their mouths to make them utter the gurgling sounds of the nightingale when they spoke to anyone, so they might fancy themselves nightingales. And the footmen and chambermaids also expressed their satisfaction, which is saying a great deal, for they are very difficult to please. In fact, the nightingale's visit was most successful. She was now to remain at court, to have her own cage, with liberty to go out twice a day, and once during the night. 12 servants were appointed to attend her on these occasions, who each held her by a silken string fastened to her leg. There was certainly not much pleasure in this kind of flying. The whole city spoke of the wonderful bird, and when two people met, one said Nightin, and the other said Gale, and they understood what was meant, for nothing else was talked of. 11 peddlers' children were named after her, but not of them could sing a note. One day, the emperor received a large packet on which was written, "The Nightingale." "Here is no doubt a new book about our celebrated bird," said the emperor. But instead of a book, it was a work of art contained in a casket, an artificial nightingale made to look like a living one, and covered all over with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. As soon as the artificial bird was wound up, it could sing like the real one, and could move its tail up and down, which sparkled with silver and gold. Round its neck hung a piece of ribbon on which was written, "The Emperor of China's nightingale is poor compared with that of the Emperor of Japan's." "This is very beautiful," exclaimed all who saw it, and he who had brought the artificial bird received the title of Imperial Nightingale Bringer-in-Chief. "Now they must sing together," said the court, "and what a duet it will be." But they did not get on well, for the real nightingale sang in its own natural way, but the artificial bird sang only waltzes. "That is not a fault," said the music master. "It is quite perfect to my taste." So then it had to sing alone, and was as successful as the real bird. Besides, it was so much prettier to look at, for it sparkled like bracelets and breastpins. 33 times did it sing the same tunes without being tired. The people would gladly have heard it again, but the emperor said the living nightingale ought to sing something. But where was she? No one had noticed her when she flew out at the open window, back to her own green woods. "What strange conduct," said the emperor, when her flight had been discovered. And all the courtiers blamed her, and said she was a very ungrateful creature. "But we have the best bird, after all," said one. And then they would have the bird sing again, although it was the 34th time they had listened to the same piece. and even then they had not learnt it, for it was rather difficult. But the music master praised the bird in the highest degree, and even asserted that it was better than a real nightingale, not only in its dress and the beautiful diamonds, but also in its musical power. For you must perceive, my chief lord and emperor, that with a real nightingale we can never tell what is going to be sung. But with this bird, everything is settled. It can be opened and explained so that people may understand how the waltzes are formed and why one note follows upon another. This is exactly what we think, they all replied, and then the music master received permission to exhibit the bird to the people on the following Sunday, and the emperor commanded that they should be present to hear it sing. When they heard it, they were like people intoxicated. However, it must have been with drinking tea, which is quite a Chinese custom. They all said, "Oh," and held up their forefingers and nodded. But a poor fisherman who had heard the real nightingale said, "It sounds prettily enough, and the melodies are all alike. Yet there seems something wanting. I cannot exactly tell what." And after this, the real nightingale was banished from the empire. The artificial bird was placed on a silk cushion close to the emperor's bed. The presents of gold and precious stones, which had been received with it, were round the bird, and it was now advanced to the title of Little Imperial Toilet Singer, and to the rank of number 1 on the left hand, for the emperor considered the left side on which the heart lies as the most noble, and the heart of an emperor is in the same place as that of other people. The music master wrote a work in 25 volumes about the artificial bird, which was very learned and very long and full of the most difficult Chinese words. Yet all the people said they had read it and understood it for fear of being thought stupid and having their bodies trampled upon. So a year passed, and the emperor, the court, and all the other Chinese knew every little turn in the artificial bird's song, and for that same reason, it pleased them better. They could sing with the bird, which they often did. The street boys sang "Zee zee zee," "Cluck cluck cluck," and the emperor himself could sing it also. It was really most amusing. One evening, when the artificial bird was singing its best, and the emperor lay in bed listening to it, something inside the bird sounded whiz. Then a spring cracked. Whir went all the wheels running round, and then the music stopped. The emperor immediately sprang out of bed and called for his physician. But what could he do? Then they sent for a watchmaker, and after a great deal of talking and examination, the bird was put into something like order. But he said that it must be used very carefully, as the barrels were worn, and it would be impossible to put in new ones without injuring the music. Now there was great sorrow, as the bird could only be allowed to play once a year. and even that was dangerous for the works inside it. Then the music master made a little speech full of hard words and declared that the bird was as good as ever. And of course, no one contradicted him. 5 years passed, and then a real grief came upon the land. The Chinese really were fond of their emperor, and he now lay so ill that he was not expected to live. Already a new emperor had been chosen, and the people who stood in the street asked the lord-in-waiting how the old emperor was. But he only said, "Pooh," and shook his head. Cold and pale lay the emperor in his royal bed. The whole court thought he was dead, and everyone ran away to pay homage to his successor. The chamberlains went out to have a talk on the matter, and the ladies' maids invited company to take coffee. Cloth had been laid down on the halls and passages so that not a footstep should be heard, and all was silent and still. But the emperor was not yet dead, although he lay white and stiff on his gorgeous bed, with the long velvet curtains and heavy gold tassels. A window stood open, and the moon shone in upon the emperor and the artificial bird. The poor emperor, finding he could scarcely breathe, with a strange weight on his chest, opened his eyes and saw death sitting there. He had put on the emperor's golden crown and held in one hand his sword of state, and in the other his beautiful banner. All around the bed, and peeping through the long velvet curtains, were a number of strange heads, some very ugly, and others lovely and gentle-looking. These were the emperor's good and bad deeds, which stared him in the face. Now death sat at his heart. Do you remember this? Do you recollect that they asked one after another, thus bringing to his remembrance circumstances that made the perspiration stand on his brow? "I know nothing about it," said the emperor. "Music, music," he cried. "The large Chinese drum, that I may not hear what they say." But they still went on, and death nodded like a Chinaman to all they said. "Music, music," shouted the emperor. "You little, precious, golden bird, sing, pray sing. I have given you gold and costly presents. I have even hung my golden slipper round your neck. Sing, sing." But the bird remained silent. There was no one to wind it up, and therefore it could not sing a note. Death continued to stare at the emperor with his cold, hollow eyes, and the room was fearfully still. Suddenly, there came through the open window the sound of sweet music. Outside on the bough of a tree sat the living nightingale. She had heard of the emperor's illness and was therefore come to sing to him of hope and trust. And as she sung, the shadows grew paler and paler. The blood in the emperor's veins flowed more rapidly and gave life to his weak limbs. And even death himself listened and said, "Go on, little nightingale, go on. Then will you give me the beautiful golden sword and that rich banner, and will you give me the emperor's crown?" said the bird. So Death gave up each of these treasures for a song, and the nightingale continued her singing. She sung of the quiet churchyard, where the white roses grow, where the elder tree wafts its perfume on the breeze, and the fresh, sweet grass is moistened by the mourner's tears. Then Death longed to go and see his garden, and floated out through the window in the form of a cold, white mist. Thanks, thanks, you heavenly little bird. I know you well. I banished you from my kingdom once, and yet you have charmed away the evil faces from my bed, and banished death from my heart with your sweet song. How can I reward you? You have already rewarded me, said the nightingale. I shall never forget that I drew tears from your eyes the first time I sang to you. These are the jewels that rejoice a singer's heart. But now sleep and grow strong and well again. I will sing to you again. And as she sung, the emperor fell into a sweet sleep. And how mittelzoll and refreshing that slumber was. When he awoke, strengthened and restored, the sun shone brightly through the window, but not one of his servants had returned. They all believed he was dead. Only the nightingale still sat beside him and sang. You must always remain with me, said the emperor. You shall sing only when it pleases you, and I will break the artificial bird into 1,000 pieces. No, do not do that, replied the nightingale. The bird did very well as long as it could. Keep it here still. I cannot live in the palace and build my nest, but let me come when I like. I will sit on a bough outside your window in the evening and sing to you so that you may be happy and have thoughts full of joy. I will sing to you of those who are happy and those who suffer, of the good and the evil who are hidden around you. The little singing bird flies far from you and your court to the home of the fishermen and the peasants caught. I love your heart better than your crown, and yet something holy lingers round that also. I will come, I will sing to you, but you must promise me one thing. Everything, said the emperor, who, having dressed himself in his imperial robes, stood with the hand that held the heavy golden sword pressed to his heart. I only ask one thing, she replied. Let no one know that you have a little bird who tells you everything. It will be best to conceal it. So saying, the nightingale flew away. The servants now came in to look after the dead emperor, when lo there he stood, and to their astonishment said, Good morning. The ugly duckling, it was lovely. Summer weather in the country, and the golden corn, the green oats, and the haystacks piled up by the meadows looked beautiful. The stork walking about on his long red legs chattered in the Egyptian language, which he had learnt from his mother. The cornfields and meadows were surrounded by large forests, in the midst of which were deep pools. It was indeed delightful to walk about in the country. In a sunny spot stood a pleasant old farmhouse close by a deep river, and from the house down to the water side grew great burdock leaves, as high that under the tallest of them a little child could stand upright. The spot was as wild as the center of a thick wood. In this snug retreat sat a duck on her nest, watching for her young brood to hatch. She was beginning to get tired of her task, for the little ones were a long time coming out of their shells, and she seldom had any visitors. These other ducks liked much better to swim about in the river than to climb the slippery banks and sit under a burdock leaf to have a gossip with her. At length, one shell cracked, and then another, and from each egg came a living creature that lifted its head and cried, "Peep, peep." "Quack, quack," said the mother, and then they all quacked as well as they could, and looked about them on every side at the large green leaves. Their mother allowed them to look as much as they liked, because green is good for the eyes. "How large the world is," said the young ducks, when they found how much more room they now had than while they were inside the eggshell. "Do you imagine this is the whole world?" asked the mother. "Wait till you have seen the garden. It stretches far beyond that to the parson's field, but I have never ventured to such a distance. Are you all out?" she continued, rising. "No, I declare the largest egg lies there still. I wonder how long this is to last. I am quite tired of it." And she seated herself again on the nest. "Well, how are you getting on?" asked an old duck who paid her a visit. "One egg is not hatched yet," said the duck. "It will not break. But just look at all the others. Are they not the prettiest little ducklings you ever saw? They are the image of their father, who is so unkind. He never comes to see." "Let me see the egg that will not break," said the duck. "I have no doubt it is a turkey's egg. I was persuaded to hatch some once, and after all my care and trouble with the young ones, they were afraid of the water. I quacked and clucked, but all to no purpose. I could not get them to venture in. Let me look at the egg. Yes, that is a turkey's egg. Take my advice, leave it where it is, and teach the other children to swim. I think I will sit on it a little while longer," said the duck. "As I have sat so long already, a few days will be nothing." "Please yourself," said the old duck, and she went away. At last the large egg broke, and a young crept forth, crying, "Peep, peep." It was very large and ugly. The duck stared at it and exclaimed, "It is very large and not at all like the others. I wonder if it really is a turkey." We shall soon find it out, however, when we go to the water. It must go in if I have to push it myself. On the next day, the weather was delightful, and the sun shone brightly on the green burdock leaves. So the mother duck took her young brood down to the water and jumped in with a splash. "Quack, quack," cried she, and one after another, the little ducklings jumped in. The water closed over their heads, but they came up again in an instant and swam about quite prettily, with their legs paddling under them as easily as possible. And the ugly duckling was also in the water, swimming with them. "Oh," said the mother, "that is not a turkey. How well he uses his legs, and how upright he holds himself. He is my own child, and he is not so very ugly, after all, if you look at him properly. Quack, quack, come with me now. I will take you into grand society and introduce you to the farmyard, but you must keep close to me, or you may be trodden upon. And above all, beware of the cat." When they reached the farmyard, there was a great disturbance. 2 families were fighting for an eel's head, which, after all, was carried off by the cat. "See, children, that is the way of the world," said the mother duck, wetting her beak, for she would have liked the eel's head herself. "Come now, use your legs, and let me see how well you can behave. Thou must bow your heads prettily to that old duck yonder. She is the highest born of them all, and has Spanish blood. Therefore she is well off. Don't you see, she has a red flag tied to her leg, which is something very grand, and a great honor for a duck. It shows that everyone is anxious not to lose her, as she can be recognized both by man and beast. Come now, don't turn your toes. A well-bred duckling spreads his feet wide apart, just like his father and mother in this way. Now bend your neck and say quack." The ducklings did as they were bid, but the other duck stared and said, "Look here, comes another brood, as if there were not enough of us already. And what a queer-looking object one of them is. We don't want him here." And then one flew out and bit him in the neck. "Let him alone," said the mother. "He is not doing any harm." "Yes, but he is so big and ugly," said the spiteful duck, "and therefore he must be turned out. The others are very pretty children," said the old duck with the rag on her leg. "All but that one. I wish his mother could improve him a little." "That is impossible, your grace," replied the mother. "He is not pretty, but he has a very good disposition and swims as well, or even better than the others. I think he will grow up pretty and perhaps be smaller." He has remained too long in the egg, and therefore his figure is not properly formed. And then she stroked his neck and smoothed the feathers, saying, "It is a drake, and therefore not of so much consequence. I think he will grow up strong and able to take care of himself. The other ducklings are graceful enough," said the old duck. "Now make yourself at home, and if you can find an eel's head, you can bring it to me." And so they made themselves comfortable. But the poor duckling, who had crept out of his shell last of all, and looked so ugly, was bitten and pushed and made fun of, not only by the ducks, but by all the poultry. "He is too big," they all said. And the turkey cock, who had been born into the world with spurs and fancied himself really an emperor, puffed himself out like a vessel in full sail, and flew at the duckling, and became quite red in the head with passion, so that the poor little thing did not know where to go, and was quite miserable because he was so ugly, and laughed at by the whole farmyard. So it went on from day to day till it got worse and worse. The poor duckling was driven about by everyone. Even his brothers and sisters were unkind to him, and would say, "Ah, you ugly creature, I wish the cat would get you." And his mother said she wished he had never been born. The ducks pecked him, the chickens beat him, and the girl who fed the poultry kicked him with her feet. So at last he ran away, frightening the little birds in the hedge as he flew over the palings. "They are afraid of me because I am ugly," he said. So he closed his eyes and flew still farther until he came out on a large moor inhabited by wild ducks. Here he remained the whole night, feeling very tired and sorrowful. In the morning, when the wild ducks rose in the air, they stared at their new comrade. "What sort of a duck are you?" they all said, coming round him. He bowed to them and was as polite as he could be, but he did not reply to their question. "You are exceedingly ugly," said the wild ducks, "but that will not matter if you do not want to marry one of our family." Poor thing, he had no thoughts of marriage. All he wanted was permission to lie among the rushes and drink some of the water on the moor. After he had been on the moor 2 days, there came 2 wild geese, or rather goslings, for they had not been out of the egg long and were very saucy. "Listen, friend," said one of them to the duckling. "You are so ugly that we love you very well. Will you go with us and become a bird of passage? Not far from here is another moor in which there are some pretty wild geese, all unmarried. It is a chance for you to get a wife. You may be lucky, ugly as you are." Pop, pop sounded in the air, and the 2 wild geese fell dead among the rushes, and the water was tinged with blood. Pop, pop, echoed far and wide in the distance, and whole flocks of wild geese rose up from the rushes. The sound continued from every direction, for the sportsmen surrounded the moor, and some were even seated on branches of trees overlooking the rushes. The blue smoke from the guns rose like clouds over the dark trees, and as it floated away across the water, a number of sporting dogs bounded in among the rushes which bent beneath them wherever they went. How they terrified the poor duckling! He turned away his head to hide it under his wing, and at the same moment, a large, terrible dog passed quite near him. His jaws were open, his tongue hung from his mouth, and his eyes glared fearfully. He thrust his nose close to the duckling, showing his sharp teeth, and then splash, splash. He went into the water without touching him. "Oh," sighed the duckling, "how thankful I am for being so ugly. Even a dog will not bite me." And so he lay quite still, while the shot rattled through the rushes, and after gun was fired over him. It was late in the day before all became quiet, but even then, the poor young thing did not dare to move. He waited quietly for several hours, and then, after looking carefully around him, hastened away from the moor as fast as he could. He ran over field and meadow till a storm arose, and he could hardly struggle against it. Towards evening, he reached a poor little cottage that seemed ready to fall, and only remained standing because it couldn't decide on which side to fall first. The storm continued so violent that the duckling could go no farther. He sat down by the cottage, and then he noticed that the door was not quite closed, in consequence of one of the hinges having given way. There was therefore a narrow opening near the bottom, large enough for him to slip through, which he did very quietly, and got a shelter for the night. A woman, a tomcat, and a hen lived in this cottage. The tomcat, whom the mistress called "my little son," was a great favorite. He could raise his back and purr, and could even throw out sparks from his fur if it were stroked the wrong way. The hen had very short legs, so she was called Chickie Shortlegs. She laid good eggs, and her mistress loved her as if she had been her own child. In the morning, the strange visitor was discovered, and the tomcat began to purr, and the hen to cluck. "What is that noise about?" said the old woman, looking round the room. But her sight was not very good. Therefore, when she saw the duckling, she thought it must be a fat duck that had strayed from home. "Oh, what a prize!" she exclaimed. "I hope it is not a drake, for then I shall have some duck's eggs. I must wait and see." So the duckling was allowed to remain on trial for 3 weeks, but there were no eggs. Now the tom cat was the master of the house, and the hen was mistress, and they always said, "We and the world," for they believed themselves to be half the world, and the better half too. The duckling thought that others might hold a different opinion on the subject, but the hen would not listen to such doubts. "Can you lay eggs?" she asked. "No." "Then have the goodness to hold your tongue. Can you raise your back, or purr, or throw out sparks?" said the tomcat. "No." "Then you have no right to express an opinion when sensible people are speaking." So the duckling sat in a corner, feeling very low-spirited, till the sunshine and the fresh air came into the room through the open door, and then he began to feel such a great longing for a swim on the water that he could not help telling the hen. "What an absurd idea," said the hen. "You have nothing else to do, therefore you have foolish fancies. If you could purr or lay eggs, they would pass away. But it is so delightful to swim about on the water," said the duckling, "and so refreshing to feel it close over your head while you dive down to the bottom." "Delightful indeed," said the hen. "Why, you must be crazy. Ask the cat. He is the cleverest animal. I know. Ask him how he would like to swim about on the water, or to dive under it, for I will not speak of my own opinion. Ask our mistress, the old woman. There is no one in the world more clever than she is. Do you think she would like to swim, or to let the water close over her head?" "You don't understand me," said the duckling. "We don't understand you. Who can understand you? I wonder. Do you consider yourself more clever than the cat or the old woman? I will say nothing of myself. Don't imagine such nonsense, child, and thank your good fortune that you have been received here. Are you not in a warm room, and in society from which you may learn something? But you are a chatterer, and your company is not very agreeable. Believe me, I speak only for your own good. I may tell you unpleasant truths, but that is a proof of my friendship. I advise you, therefore, to lay eggs and learn to purr as quickly as possible. I believe I must go out into the world again," said the duckling. "Yes, do," said the hen. So the duckling left the cottage and soon found water on which it could swim and dive, but was avoided by all other animals because of its ugly appearance. Autumn came, and the leaves in the forest turned to orange and gold. Then, as winter approached, the wind caught them as they fell and whirled them in the cold air. The clouds, heavy with hail and snowflakes, hung low in the sky, and the raven stood on the ferns, crying, "Croak, croak." It made one shiver with cold to look at him. All this was very sad for the poor little duckling. One evening, just as the sun set amid radiant clouds, there came a large flock of beautiful birds out of the bushes. The duckling had never seen any like them before. They were swans, and they curved their graceful necks, while their soft plumage shone with dazzling whiteness. They uttered a singular cry as they spread their glorious wings and flew away from those cold regions to warmer countries across the sea. As they mounted higher and higher in the air, the ugly little duckling felt quite a strange sensation as he watched them. He whirled himself in the water, like a wheel, stretched out his neck towards them, and uttered a cry so strange that it frightened himself. Could he ever forget those beautiful happy birds? And when at last they were out of his sight, he dived under the water and rose again, almost beside himself with excitement. I knew not the names of these birds, nor where they had flown, but he felt towards them as he had never felt for any other bird in the world. He was not envious of these beautiful creatures, but wished to be as lovely as they. Poor ugly creature, how gladly he would have lived, even with the ducks, had they only given him encouragement. The winter grew colder and colder. He was obliged to swim about on the water to keep it from freezing. But every night, the space on which he swam became smaller and smaller. At length, it froze so hard that the ice in the water crackled as he moved, and the duckling had to paddle with his legs as well as he could to keep the space from closing up. He became exhausted at last and lay still and helpless, frozen fast in the ice. Early in the morning, a peasant who was passing by saw what had happened. He broke the ice in pieces with his wooden shoe and carried the duckling home to his wife. The warmth revived the poor little creature, but when the children wanted to play with him, the duckling thought they would do him some harm. So he started up in terror, fluttered into the milk pan, and splashed the milk about the room. Then the woman clapped her hands, which frightened him still more. He flew first into the butter cask, then into the meal tub, and out again. What a condition he was! The woman screamed and struck at him with the tongs. The children laughed and screamed and tumbled over each other in their efforts to catch him. But luckily, he escaped. The door stood open. The poor creature could just manage to slip out among the bushes and lie down quite exhausted in the newly fallen snow. It would be very sad were I to relate all the misery and privations which the poor little duckling endured during the hard winter. But when it had passed, he found himself lying one morning in a moor amongst the rushes. He felt the warm sun shining and heard the lark singing and saw that all around was beautiful spring. Then the young bird felt that his wings were strong as he flapped them against his sides and rose high into the air. They bore him onwards until he found himself in a large garden before he well knew how it had happened. The apple trees were in full blossom, and the fragrant elders bent their long green branches down to the stream, which wound round a smooth lawn. Everything looked beautiful in the freshness of early spring. From a thicket close by came 3 beautiful white swans, rustling their feathers and swimming lightly over the smooth water. The duckling remembered the lovely birds and felt more strangely unhappy than ever. "I will fly to those royal birds," he exclaimed, "and they will kill me because I am so ugly and dare to approach them. But it does not matter. Better be killed by them than pecked by the ducks, beaten by the hens, pushed about by the maiden who feeds the poultry, or starved with hunger in the winter." Then he flew to the water and swam towards the beautiful swans. The moment they espied the stranger, they rushed to meet him with outstretched wings. "Kill me," said the poor bird, and he bent his head down to the surface of the water and awaited death. But what did he see in the clear stream below his own image? No longer a dark gray bird, ugly and disagreeable to look at, but a graceful and beautiful swan. To be born in a duck's nest in a farmyard is of no consequence to a bird if it is hatched from a swan's egg. He now felt glad at having suffered sorrow and trouble, because it enabled him to enjoy so much better all the pleasure and happiness around him. For the great swans swam round the newcomer and stroked his neck with their beaks as a welcome. Into the garden, presently, came some little children and threw bread and cake into the water. "See," cried the youngest, "there is a new one." And the rest were delighted and ran to their father and mother, dancing and clapping their hands and shouting joyously, "There is another swan come. A new one has arrived." Then they threw more bread and cake into the water and said, "The new one is the most beautiful of all. He is so young and pretty." And the old swans bowed their heads before him. Then he felt quite ashamed and hid his head under his wing, for he did not know what to do. He was so happy, and yet not at all proud. He had been persecuted and despised for his ugliness, and now he heard them say he was the most beautiful of all the birds. Even the elder tree bent down its boughs into the water before him, and the sun shone warm and bright. Then he rustled his feathers, curved his slender neck, and cried joyfully from the depths of his heart, "I never dreamed of such happiness as this while I was an ugly duckling." By the almshouse window, near the old grass-covered rampart that encircles Copenhagen, there stands a large red house. Its bricks are faded with age and weather, yet the windows bloom with life. Rows of balsams, geraniums, and tiny pots of ivy spill over the ledges, greeting the passer-by with soft colors and a faint scent of soil and sunlight. Within, however, the brightness of the flowers is at odds with the rooms they adorn. The walls are bare, the furniture is meager and worn by long use. Poverty has taken root there, but so too has patience and quiet endurance. The building is known as the Wharton Almshouse, a refuge for those who have outlived both fortune and family. At one of those windows leans an old maid. Her hair, once golden, perhaps is now silvered neatly put beneath a small lace cap. She plucks a withered leaf from her balsam and lets it fall. Her gaze drifts outward to the green rampart, where the grass sways in the sea breeze, and where a troop of children are playing in the sun. Their laughter rises like birdsong into the still afternoon air. What is she thinking of this solitary watcher behind the flowers? A whole drama of life unfolds silently before her, one she knows too well, for it is her own. The children below, how light their spirits are. They tumble and chase one another through the grass, their voices clear as bells. Their cheeks are red as apples, their eyes bright as spring water. Yet their feet are bare and their garments are patched and thin. Still they laugh as though the earth were heaven. They dance on that very patch of rampart, where long ago the ground was said to sink and tremble. For there, so, the old tale tells, a playful child was lured with flowers and sweets toward an open grave. When the earth closed again over that tiny form, the soil grew firm, and never since has it yielded. The story whispers through the generations, though few remember it now. The little ones who dance above that quiet grave know nothing of it. Had they known, they might imagine they heard a faint cry beneath their feet, and they might think the morning dew were tears from the child below. Nor do they know of the king, the brave Danish king, who once stood upon that same rampart before the face of his trembling courtiers. With the enemy pressing near, he raised his sword and swore he would hold the city with its citizens, and if need be, perish there within his nest. They know nothing of the soldiers who fell upon this ground, nor of the women who from those windows poured boiling water upon white-clad foes hiding in the snow. Time has softened the cries of battle into the laughter of children. Play on, little ones. Play on, for life's hours of joy are few, and they pass like the drifting clouds over the city towers. See, among them runs a fair-haired girl, her laughter clear as a bell. Soon the years will come, those radiant years of youth that shine like a brief summer evening before the dusk of toil and sorrow. The day will come when priestly hands rest upon the heads of the young for confirmation. Then she too will walk proudly on the rampart, her white frock fluttering in the wind. Her mother has spent many a night by the dim lamp sewing that dress. Not new cloth, but carefully cut down from one long forgotten in a chest. A red shawl, large and too long for her slight frame, is thrown about her shoulders, yet she feels as grand as a princess. Around her, the bells ring from every steeple, and the air smells of budding lilac and spring rain. Her heart is full of innocent dreams and whispered prayers. Oh, how beautiful life seems on the green rampart. Then the years roll forward, bearing laughter and tears in equal measure. There are dark days, yes, many, but her heart is brave and her faith steadfast. And there, without knowing quite when or how, she finds a friend. Their paths cross often, as if by chance. Together, they walk that same rampart when the days grow long and the air is heavy with the scent of lilacs. They talk of nothing, and yet of everything. The city glows golden in the distance. The world seems wide and waiting. The heart is young, and to be young is to believe that joy will last forever. Each spring, the same tree stands near the castle of Rosenborg, the first to unfold its tender green buds. Every year, new leaves appear bright and full of life. But the human heart does not renew so easily. Shadows gather there that no sun can wholly dispel. Clouds heavier than the northern mists drift through its chambers. For our maiden love blooms and fades. Her friend, her heart's chosen one, falls ill and dies. His bridal chamber is a coffin of black wood. She wears no wreath, no veil, only silence and remembrance. And so the seasons pass. The laughter of children continues on the rampart. The lilacs still flower, the bells still ring in springtime. But she, the maiden of the rampart, grows older, quieter. The mirror tells her truth without mercy. Silver hair, where gold once gleamed, lines where once were smiles. Her world has narrowed to a small window behind the balsams in the Wharton almshouse. There she sits day after day, watching the green hill and the playing children. They are as she once was, bright, unburdened, full of dreams. And she, watching them, lives her life again in memory. The white frock, the red shawl, the budding tree, the vow of love that ended in a grave. This is the play of her heart, the silent drama of a life remembered. No audience applauds it, no curtain falls. Yet as the sunlight trembles on the rampart and the laughter of children rises into the air, something eternal lingers there, ere the cycle of innocence and loss of joy, renewed in others, though ended in oneself. Behind the window, the old maid smiles faintly through her tears, for outside the children are dancing upon the green sunlit rampart, their bare feet light as birds' wings upon the earth that keeps so many secrets.